waking up to another morning of air raid sirens and explosions as Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine. Forces are now moving into Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. This morning, Ukrainians are also being encouraged by the foreign ministry to make Molotov cocktails to take out Russian troops. Joining me right now is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Colonel Davis, it's good to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. Also joining the conversation all morning long this morning is former Wisconsin Congressman, Fox News contributor Sean Duffy, and the Wall Street Journal's assistant editorial page editor, James Freeman. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel, thanks very much for being here. Can you assess the situation for us on the ground as far as you know in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see come together an understanding of exactly what Putin's trying to do. And that is he has sent his troops in on a number of axes, as many expected him to do, for the purpose of trying to really to destroy piecemeal the actual Ukrainian armed forces. And then he's going to try to move his forces into probably to surround the capital of Kyiv to try to force a political settlement. Already Zelensky has actually been on the radio and in the news earlier today saying that he actually would contemplate signing a declaration of neutrality. And Peskov from Moscow has indicated that's something that the Russians would consider as well. So that could be the one thing that could bring this war to an end, because it's certainly not going to be any sanctions. I think Putin has calculated that long ago. So it's going to remain to be seen, hopefully within the next hours, anything that can end this suffering so that the people of Ukraine don't die anymore is a good thing.
It's just incredible. This was a perfectly peaceful city and state and country, and Russia wanting more territory. Vladimir Putin completely upset that, upended the entire country. Are you expecting Kyiv to fall over the weekend or today?
No, I don't think so. In fact, when you look at the actual force dispositions, Russia doesn't have enough troops to actually conquer Kyiv. They have enough to surround it and to isolate it, but they don't have enough to destroy it. And certainly that's good news for the people there. But he doesn't have enough to do that. So that's one thing that we need to keep an eye on, because I don't think that he even wants to try that, because that would be so bloody and it would be terrible press both at home and abroad.
So then how does this end?
Well, it's going to end either with Zelensky finally just acceding to reality, which frankly is one of the things I think that both the current president administration, Biden, as well as the NATO leadership, deserve a little bit of blame, I suppose, because they didn't take the offer, the chance we had before there was an invasion, to just acknowledge reality that Ukraine's not going to come into NATO. Don't claim that the door is going to be open, because we know we're not going to fight for Ukraine, and as we're proving right now. And so we've left them all alone. They're the only ones fighting. No one's coming to them. Their forces can't stand up against Russia, which is highlighted by what you just said about the defense minister asking regular civilians to have Molotov cocktails. That's an act of desperation, and they need to stop that right now and say, look, let's just end this by negotiated settlement. Let's don't require it to even give Russia a chance to want to invade, to attack the rest of Ukraine, the rest of Kyiv, which would have astronomical casualties.
Yeah, I mean, the president as well urging resistance to this invasion, criticizing Ukraine's allies. In a new video message, he said this morning we are defending our state alone. As we did yesterday, the world's most powerful forces are watching from afar. Zelensky also said that he would provide the weapons to citizens who want to defend Ukraine. How has that gone over, Lieutenant Colonel? I mean, do you see regular citizens getting up and fighting, and do you think that's effective?
No, it's absolutely not, and I really think that's I think it's a mistake for the president and for President Zelensky. And look, this was clear so long ago that NATO unambiguously said, we're not going to fight for you. Zelensky, about a week before the invasion, was actually saying bad things about the Western leaders, about saying, hey, you say the door is open to NATO, but where's the open door? He should have known right then it's not going to come. So why subject his country to an invasion that he knows he can't defend against? He knows that his armed forces aren't strong enough to repel the professional Russian army. And then he's, banking on his own citizens' patriotic duty, whatever, to stand up to resist. But look, Maria, they can't succeed. All they can do is die patriotically. but the end result is going to be the same with him not succeeding, and eventually Ukraine will not be in NATO, whether by conquest or by negotiated settlement. And I think he owes it to his people to have a negotiated settlement, whatever the cost to him personally.
Colonel, I mean, obviously, Vladimir Putin decided he wanted more territory, and he took this on and went in. Do you think that China is watching closely and could make a move on Taiwan?
Well, you certainly can't discount that. But I would challenge a little bit of the characterization, which I've heard from a number of different sources, that Putin wants territory. What he wants is a buffer. He wants a Ukraine that's not allied with the West on his buffer, again, in between him and NATO. So I think that what you'll see is that as soon as he gets the negotiated settlement he wants, he'll withdraw his forces back. He said he has no interest in occupying the country. And that's one thing he says, I believe, because that is a very costly operation. So I think that he's going to do that. But now, to your second point there, it's important. I think that China is watching very closely to this, and I hope that Taiwan pays attention, too, not to bank the security of their country on the hope that we'll come and fight for them, because we won't.
Wow. What death and destruction that we are watching this morning. Colonel, thanks very much for being here and weighing in on all of that. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you, sir.